Hi and welcome to RealClearFetish Talks RealClearPlay. It's been a bit of a break as I was on holiday for 2 weeks and I came down with a chest infection. So if you hear me coughing during the episode, that is why. I don't have COVID. I've been tested in both ends and left and right and center. So I am perfectly okay. I'm just still recovering a little bit. So never mind the coughing a little bit. But let me just bring my guest in. It's Oskar from Manchester, and I'm really excited.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm just going a little bit further down so you can see my whole face on the feed. I'm still recovering, as you could just hear me talking about.
Yeah.
But I'm not as bad as I was last weekend. I literally had no voice.
Yes.
So that wouldn't have been very interesting. But today I have a very bass, a little bit deeper voice than I normally have. So a little bit sexier, I guess.
Yeah, it works for some people, so yeah.
Oskar, would you mind moving your camera a little bit so your face is in center? That would be great help. There you go.
Better?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Just so we get you full in the frame.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for coming on, and I do apologize for the delay from last week, but it couldn't be helped.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to have you on. Let's just jump into it because we have a little hour to sit and chat about whatever comes up. But I have four standard questions at the start just to kind of get the conversation going. So the first question is, what do you prefer I call you? Name, pronouns, and title.
Oskar, he or they, and I don't have a title.
Fantastic. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Oh gosh, where do you start? Well,
just a short version, and we'll get into all the.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my name's Oskar. I'm a transmasculine, non-binary person. I've been sober for about 15 years, and I also interested in and participate in kink play in different ways. I have done various jobs through my life, and and I teach qigong. Also make films, and I'm part of a group called the House of Noir, which is a Vogue house in the north.
Fantastic. There's a lot to dive in there, and you've also already kind of answered my question 3, which is completely sober, clear-headed, or social drinker.
When I say sober, I'm really in relation to recreational drugs, basically.
Okay.
I will maybe once every couple of years have a drink, but generally I'm not all that interested in alcohol, and luckily that's not been something that's I've sort of latched into.
Fantastic.
So generally sober.
Fantastic, and that's a good thing. You kind of pointed that out for me because there's different ways of doing sober, and that's the main thing. And it is very good to represent different types of being sober, and that being free from drugs, free from alcohol, or just completely off it at all. So
yeah, I think historically people who have been off drugs have been or self-labeled or called themselves clean, but I think we kind of have moved away from that over the years.
That's one of the reasons I use RealClearFetish, not Real Clean Fetish. Oh God, could you imagine if I called the group that?
That would be confusing, I think, for a few people.
I think I would be cancelled very, very quickly. And the last question, what is clear play to you, and why is it important?
Gosh, there's so much in that question. I think really clear play on the surface is about not using some sort of substance, be that alcohol or drugs, to sort of facilitate play, and that that sort of be that numbing out or loosening yourself up or all of those kind of things, ways that we sort of explain to ourselves about how we allow things to happen in a situation. So for me, on a surface level, it's about me not being under the influence of anything, but also checking that the people that I'm playing with are not using are in a in a state where they're not sort of unable to be present in a situation, and that's can be a difficult line to navigate, because I don't want to restrict people from sort of drinking or using some, you know, if they want to smoke or something like that. But I want to be very clear that that's not really a space that I want to participate in mainly.
Absolutely. It's also, I think I mentioned this on previous episodes, it's also a question about consent.
Yeah.
The more far gone someone there, the more question there is with the
Yeah.
consent.
Well, I mean, from my own experience, I can definitely say that looking back, there are a number of situations that have been in where I'm not clear that I actually consented, because I was under the influence, and really I was just checking out a lot of the time. And so I don't want to be in a situation where I'm participating in something and the person that I'm with, I'm not clear that they are able to consent in any way. So I don't want to, you know,
I think absolutely, and I think also with someone, as you mentioned, you were 15 years clear of drugs. I'm now 4 years myself. Ever since the last episode, I celebrate my birthday. So, so it is when you've been in all that, and I would say chemsex was after you got clean, of course, but I'm sure there was drugs involved with sex, and it just didn't have a fancy name. But it's you kind of think back, and it's like, did I really consent to that? Or was it actually abuse, or on a way kind of rape? But you just don't know because you don't remember.
Yeah, and it's also as well. I think there's a lot. From again, speaking for myself, there's a lot of like performance in my younger self. There was the not really understanding what I was involved in, and sort of playing a part which wasn't necessarily me, and using drugs in some way or another to allow me to sort of participate, even though I didn't really want to. So there's that kind of fine line between, you know, I don't know if I would necessarily call it abuse, because for me, you know, definitely not as a blanket statement for all people, but definitely for me, I think it's a difficult one to call internally, because definitely part of myself was participating in a way that was like, I want to do this, but also there's the part of me that was like, actually I really don't want to be here. And so there's that kind of in performative behavior that I had as a younger person, because I was insecure and, you know, not really able to say no in a lot of situations. So
I think saying no to scenes or people can, especially in our younger, like I definitely had a trouble saying no in my 20s, because I'm there now, so I kind of have to. I'm much better at it now, and it's funny you mention it, because I literally got gaslighted by a 20-year-old this week, kind of going, "Oh, you're boring. Why are you not? Why are you saying no to me? I'm really good looking." And I'm just like, "Mate, have a wank. Come back to me afterwards, after you," because he didn't want to do safe words. He didn't want to. He just wanted to do everything, and I'm just like, red flags, back out, no. And he kept calling me boring, and it's like, mate, you're gaslighting me. Stop doing that. That's not a good look.
No. Yeah, I mean, I'm shaming you as well, because there's that sort of element of like, oh, well, if you were not boring, then you would be doing so. I definitely don't appreciate that kind of interaction. And I think that it's something that happened. I think very much looking back at my own experience, that's something that didn't really kind of make sense to me until I got a little bit older, and I started to understand the difference between something that I've been sort of looking at in myself a lot, the difference between oppression and domination, and how that sort of works in myself, and then also how understanding that more in myself reflects on how I interact with other people. And also this idea that consent is given at the beginning and then is not negotiated throughout the interaction. That took me a while to understand when I was younger, and it wasn't until I was in at a party, a play party, and I agreed to do a scene, and the person that I was with kept checking in on me every couple of minutes. And at first I was quite confused by it, and then I was like, this makes sense. Of course.
This is what he's supposed to do. Yes.
So that was
that is a good Dom checking in with the sub. Just like, still okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So it took it, again, and that's why I say, it took that time, because you gain experience as you meet people. You meet people who you think know how to do something, and then someone you meet later on does something different, and you're like, oh, there's actually a sort of breadth of experience and different ways of doing this. And then in time you start to develop your own way of working with people. So yeah,
that is the problem we now face, especially on the fetish scene. There is no mentors in the same way we had maybe in the 80s and 90s, because we lost a whole generation of people that could teach the children what to do and what not to do. I've definitely seen things on Twitter where I wrote to the person like, that is not safe. You need to rethink that. Did you think of the consequences of if this person got hurt? And we've seen it before. People get hurt or die if they don't practice safe kink.
Absolutely. And I think that's also, I think it's partly losing that generation. There's definitely that. But I do know people who are in very structured sort of relationships where that kind of knowledge is passed on. But there's like the availability of it, especially in like from a wider social media global market perspective. The fact that we can talk about kink in the mainstream now to a certain degree, thanks to some of the popular films that have come out that kind of use the subject but don't necessarily represent it in a great way. So like people who are coming into sort of the idea of playing with it are again like thinking that it's all about this sort of external performance, rather than what I've discovered as more and more is like, how do we interact relationally? What is the dynamics of this interaction? There are specific sort of agreements in place in the way that we might be using something, or we might be taking on particular roles, but really, how are we as human beings expressing, affection, love, kindness, exploring our relationship with pleasure, all of these kind of things that are happening, which are really, I think, the juicy parts of it, as opposed to whether I'm wearing a particular thing or, that sort of interaction.
So how long have you been practicing kink, and can I ask what type of kink you're into?
I'm still exploring, really. I've been sort of in and out of play spaces since maybe 2010. And most of them have been like private spaces. I haven't, when I began sort of interacting, I mean, I've always had an interest in like power mainly. So my fantasies even before getting into kink were around sort of power dynamics and stuff like that. So So mainly I played in private spaces, though not really, or very much queer trans spaces, which there aren't that many.
No.
But I didn't when I first sort of came out, and before I sort of looked as masculine as I do now. It was a much more difficult space to be in sort of the mainstream kink spaces.
Yeah, as it's not my experience, I wouldn't be able to imagine that at all,
Yeah.
how that might feel. So how do you find like navigating what is primarily a cisgendered fetish scene as a
Mm.
trans man? I'm, I, I still learn, and because it's not
Yeah.
my experience, sometimes it boggles my brain as well. But that's okay. But how do you find that navigating, which is primarily cisgendered?
Well, like I said, the spaces I've been in have mainly been trans and queer
Mm,
spaces. So in that sense, and I haven't really been in many kink spaces that have been cisgendered. So I can't really comment on sort of clubs or anything like that because I haven't gone to them. I'd like to see what they're like,
yeah.
just as a curiosity, really. Um, I have found sort of watching spaces or being in some of the online social spaces that generally I tend to sort of fade into the background or not really be noticed, and that's both good and bad in some ways. And then people who do interact with me tend to be very um, focused on their own fantasies around my physical body.
Yeah.
No, I don't tend to interact with them for long. So more and more, I sort of find myself saying no as opposed to yes, because I've passed that point where I need to be in age. I've passed that point of needing to be validated by somebody because they interact with me. So I just tend to go, nice to meet you and goodbye.
Yeah.
Also, I find the whole it's just a personal thing, but I find the idea of somebody younger than me referring to themselves as a daddy quite like.
I must admit, I do get called daddy, and I do have a boy in the States who calls me daddy. He's
Yeah,
older than me. He's like 3 years older than me.
yeah,
But it kind of works and so on. And
yeah.
I also think I'm in late 30s now. I can almost get away
You
with
can get away with that, I guess. Yeah, but sometimes they're like very young, and I'm kind of like,
no, no,
no,
no, no, no. You don't even have hair on your chin. Doesn't work. Doesn't work.
I'm not sure where to go with this. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's maybe a naughty uncle or
yeah, it's
something
a
like that.
personality, really. Like it's not definitely not a statement about people who are younger using the title, but it does. For me, it just seems a bit. Oh, maybe that's because I'm getting older.
Yeah. Oh, I think we all get like that, and definitely the older I get, the younger the guys who are interested in me are becoming. And it's also, I'm happy to mentor or advise or guide, but I'm not necessarily sexually interested in very young guys. It's just not
Yeah,
been my thing. I've always gone older, but because it's kind of leveled out now, because now I'm older, it's kind of my own age and a little bit up above that, so it
yeah,
just works. But
yeah.
yeah, I've definitely now have 20-year-olds where I'm listening to what they're saying, and I'm like, that was me when I was 20, and I'm not happy about it.
It's a revealing experience.
Very, very, because
Very confronting.
and of course you have to start somewhere. When at least when you're a gearhead, kinks can be a lot of things, but when you're a gearhead, it's really expensive and depends on what
Mm,
you're into. And when you're 20, you don't have a lot.
no.
So I often get people's like, "Oh, yeah, you can dress me in yours," and it's like, um, No, I'm not interested in having sex with people with my own clothes on. And I used to do that myself, so I'm completely blanking about that. It's
Yeah.
very funny, and it's just karma coming back at me now.
Yeah, yeah, that I could see that being. It's funny that with younger people, like often through no like intention, really do sort of show me how I, go. Oh, you used to do that. You might want to own up to that. It's good because it helps me to be more like compassionate. Um, I'm not definitely not sort of pushing them away in that sense, but
No.
like there's a kind of like having to own my own stuff through seeing how other people are doing that same thing, and just like also how unoriginal we are as human beings. Oh,
Just
that again.
doing the same thing I did. Jesus. Okay, we're not moved any further than that. Yeah.
No, the culture is still here.
So you mentioned you were 15 years off drugs. What brought you to that point where you kind of went, I need to stop this?
Well, the I got to a point where I was I was struggling with a lot of mental health issues as well as sort of trying to come to terms with being trans. And I got to a point where I was basically living on the couch of my ex's flat, and had developed agoraphobia by that point. So I was basically making them go out and score for me. And I just thought, you know what, I'd be better off dead at this point. And I had to really ask myself if that was true. If that's really the case, that's a possibility. But if you were to do that, would you because there's no coming back from that. Would you actually let it happen, or would you fight for your last? Would you keep fighting?
Mm.
And the answer that came back was I would fight right to the last breath. So at that point, I was like, well, if that's true, then maybe I should start focusing my energy on the business of living rather than trying to slowly kill myself with drugs. And that's basically when I made the decision. But the journey itself took a good number of years of falling off the wagon, getting back on the wagon, falling off the wagon, getting back on the wagon. I didn't engage with the 12-step program through the beginning of my recovery, and then later on I discovered what that was about, and I'm still touching in and out of that. I think it's a great program, and it offers a lot of support, but I personally have not engaged with it that much.
Mm.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. And I've mainly done it through. I had to basically cut that life away, so I had to leave all of my friends and that support network and everything that was connected to that, because I think, I mean, for me, I don't know if it's everyone else's journey, but I definitely could not be sober and have friends who were not have friends who were using, because often I would get myself sober for a couple of weeks, and then my friend would come around with some drugs, and they would be like, "Oh, come on, just the what," that sort of thing. So there was always that needing to bring me back into the life. And I realized that I just couldn't do it if I kept the friends that I had. So I left the area I lived in. Luckily, my parents took me back, and I got myself, because they lived in a place which I had no connections in. So I basically had to find other ways of occupying myself. And I retrained and got myself a job and moved into a place that was away from all of that, and I didn't actually go back to see any of my friends for a good 5 or 10 years before, because I knew I needed to be strong enough to be able to sit in a room full of people taking drugs and not be tempted. So
Yeah.
that was I knew that quite clearly. So yeah, but basically that's sort of what I did.
I recognize a lot of that, and there's a lot of the friends, even friends I didn't necessarily use with, but who I know dabbled, are not really a part of my life now. To be honest, most of my life revolves around the London Gay Men's Chorus, but anyway. Fetish life and life, that's kind of what my life has become, which is fine. It's perfect.
I used to be a Pink singer.
Sorry?
I used to be a Pink singer.
Oh, we don't like them.
What?
No. There's very friendly rivalry between the Pink singers and the LGMC. It's very cute. I don't know anyone in the Pink singers. I think I have one acquaintance who sings with them, and they're very good. I have seen them, but of course their style and their setup is very different.
It's different.
Yeah. Oh, but they're lovely, and they do great work. And yeah, it for me, starting singing with the London Gay Men's Chorus didn't stop me using, but it was definitely, like you say, disconnect and connect with new people that wants to keep you safe. And that group was so non-judgmental, and there's several members in the group that's definitely seen me at my worst.
Yeah.
So it's quite amazing when you start reconnecting with people in a more healthy way.
Yeah. And that sense of community is what it's a powerful thing to have a space where you know that you have people who care about you and are looking out for you and accept you. And that's just means so much. And often we think we found it, or often I thought I had found it in this space of people who I was using drugs with, but actually what I realized is that space was just a place for people who didn't really care all that much about each other, to give each other permission to take drugs, and also pool our often meager resources to be able to get it. So it was a very conditional kind of
transactional.
Yeah.
It becomes that.
Exactly, but to actually be with people in the choir, where we all came together because we loved doing something together, and it was something that was very uplifting. And then, we go and have picnics in the park, or socialise in the pub, or whatever, or go to clubs. That all sort of came with it as well, but in a different way.
Yeah. It's so important. That's one of the reasons, like you mentioned, 12-step. That's why that kind of works, is in the interaction with people who understand you as well. That's also really important when it comes to recovering. It is having at least a couple of people in your network that understand what you're going through and why you're trying to stop and why you're trying to change your life. And that's why a lot of kink people group together as well, because we crave that understanding.
Absolutely.
Because I can look at myself and laugh. I'm fully dressed in cow skin, and it's like, that poor cow. But it's my fetish. It's what I love. But I can also see the ridiculousness of it. But it's nice to stand in a group where everyone's dressed like that, because they have the same interest.
And just share the enjoyment of it. It's like the part of this whole, like, our relationship to pleasure, and not making it a conditional thing. Not shaming ourselves, or only making it available to us when the conditions are right, sort of thing, but actually what brings us pleasure, and can we just allow ourselves those moments where pleasure is available to us without having to, make it acceptable in whatever way that we sort of change that surrounding to be.
You mentioned at the start you're a filmmaker.
Yes.
How long have you been making films, and what kind of films do you make?
Since I was 17, I trained with a community a community film making group. So mainly they've been making. I've been part of making pilots and pop videos and dance videos as well, sort of documenting different dance companies. More recently, I've started to look at creating short films around my experience as a trans person. And they're kind of like just short 5-minute pieces where I talk about something and then have images that are related to or not related to about that. Yeah, so that's what I do with those.
That sounds amazing. It's one of the things, just like at my workplace. I'm not going to mention who they are, but they introduced pronouns in the emails this year.
Yeah.
They've also now a choice on the system to choose your gender of choice, not what's on your certificate, which is all amazing.
Yeah.
But the problem has been, and this has been interacting with people, is there is a, at least for cisgendered people, a lack of understanding what it's about. Even I don't understand certain things, but I'm open to it and I'm open to having conversations about it. But some people are very much like, oh, that's foreign. We don't want to do that. Not necessarily because they're coming as like transphobic or anything like that. It's just a bit of lack of understanding what it's about. Where I've suggested to my companies, like, there needs to be mandatory training, either like an hour session where it's a safe space to ask stupid questions, out judgment. And I've definitely done in the past where we did some trans courses where the freedom was there, where you didn't have to like, oh, I don't want to offend someone, which is tricky. Even before this interview, I wrote you, was like, is there anything you don't want to talk about? Because trans issues can be a bit, especially when I come as a cisgendered white male asking a person of color trans man. So I don't want to come off and say the wrong thing. That's the main thing.
Well, I mean, as it's a personal interaction between the two of us, and I know you from meeting up a couple of times. I know it's coming from not coming from a place of trying to sort of undermine me as a trans person. So I can be quite open about, you know, if you say something that I think is offensive, I'll just go, well, that was kind of a bit offensive, you know. So, but I think there has to be some sort of dialogue between cis and trans people in some way. Otherwise, how do we start to move to a space where we really understand each other better? And there is you know, I think a lot of difficulty in the sort of wider space is that we have people who are making quite inflammatory statements about trans people without any kind of way for trans people to respond to that, and a lot of conversations that are being had about trans people's experience are not actually inviting trans people to the table. And I think that's really a big issue as far as myself is concerned. I don't want to speak for the trans community.
No, of course. Any opinion aired, your personal opinions, no one else's, and it's never everyone's experience. Yeah,
we're quite a diverse group of people, and we all have quite different ideas. And I think that is also something that we are really needing to start to look internally about, not just trans people, but the entire LGBT spectrum. Is like we refer to ourselves as community, and a lot of the time that's a word that's been used because of people outside of us wanting to box us all into one space for their convenience. But we haven't actually, we don't work as a community because we're disparate in a lot of ways, and we have different wants and different agendas, and we kind of assume that those agendas are relevant in all spaces, but actually sometimes they're really not, and some of them actually conflict with each other in some ways, but there's no way for us to really talk about how that can be negotiated, because we haven't got that level of communication for a community, if you see what I mean. So it's like really starting to ask, what are we and how do we work together?
For a community who keeps yelling about equality and so on, internally we're a mess. We just
Yes.
don't seem, for some reason, we just don't seem to get along. And it's even the same on the fetish scene. Depending on what fetish you have, there might even be clashes as well,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous. We're all coming from the same place. Of course, as you say, different agendas, different people, and what you experience. But one thing I've learned in the last couple of years, just because you're LGBTQ plus doesn't mean you can't be an asshole. And we've seen that in the last couple of years. We see like
we are also human beings,
which no, don't even go there. They're fucking awful. But it's so hard when we keep yelling about equality, but we just hate each other in the community.
Well, I think hate is a strong word.
Well, disagree or just don't get along as well as we should.
I think a lot of the time we have to remember that we're coming from communities that have been under threat for a very long time. And so our responses tend to be a lot about defending ourselves instead of, you know, kind of relaxing into that space and going, okay, this person is not trying to attack or destroy my way of life, but there is a need for us to communicate if we're going to move forward together. And that hasn't happened a lot between the communities. And there's a lot of historical sort of grief and resentment and other things that we've not addressed. I mean, you know, in my lifetime, when I was still presenting as female, I hadn't like transitioned yet, and living as a lesbian, I could not walk into a gay bar without being thrown out. So, you know, that's not that long ago. So, you know, we haven't always been havens for each other and supported each other and that's why I say community is something that's been given to us by an external society. And we've kind of, because we're all defending ourselves from the same group, if you like, because they're all pointing at us and saying we're all the same, we've banded together publicly to give ourselves some sort of strength and unity in that space, but we haven't given ourselves time as we've become more sort of accepted to start to look back at how do we operate with ourselves and with each other, and as you know, as times have changed, how do we change with that as well?
Yeah, it's everyone brings their own trauma to the table, and as you mentioned, it's like people do tend to like, oh, the person is attacking me, and it comes from the fact that most LGBTQ plus people are in constant flight and fight mode.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who don't experience that don't necessarily understand what that's like. I'm, as I've probably mentioned before, I have very much a privilege of being white, cisgendered, so that's not my experience. I have experience as a gay man, but I can hide in the background.
Yeah.
I can tone it down if you like to, so I can walk in the street where it's not a problem. So it's important for me to support people who can't do that.
Yeah.
And be understanding and know where they're coming from, and also fight for them as well. Because in the greater scheme of things, I don't have it that hard. I'm very, very lucky as the person I am to kind of be able to blend. Not that I should have to. That's not what I'm saying. But I am still privileged in that way.
Yeah, well, you have a certain level of safety that is afforded to you because of the way you look, and you know, other things which might also give you some level of protection, depending on where we live and what values the society we're living in has. So yeah, for sure, I totally understand that, and yeah, it just we are I think we're in a period of this, like these sort of hitting up against these sort of conflicts is really about revealing the things that we need to start to address within our own spaces. If we want to move towards more community, I mean, we may just all separate out and never speak to each other again, like like high school friends.
Hopefully that won't happen. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting, especially when we also see with like the Me Too movement and stuff like that. We see Black Lives Matter in the last couple of years. I had an experience with a neighbor where I'm walking down the street. I was behind her. She didn't look who it was, but she got scared because it was a man walking behind her.
Yeah.
Which would never cross my mind, because I'm as gay as they come and I have no interest and I would never do anything like that. And
yeah.
No. And that surprised me, but it's also made me aware of what my presence is when it comes to women. Even as a gay man, I kind of have to be mindful of how I interact with other women, because I don't want to be seen as a threat.
Yeah.
And that's important.
There's a lot of, there's so much.
I'm sure we could keep talking about that for...
You wouldn't, I don't want to get into that because we probably need another 10 hours.
Yeah. We're coming down to like the last 10 minutes. So I was curious about your Vogue house in Manchester. Tell me a little bit.
Yes. House of Noir, yeah.
House of Noir.
Yeah, it was created by Darren Pritchard, who is like one of the sort of power players, if you like, in the North. He's the mother of the House of Ghetto, House of Noir, House of Black, House of Flavor, like a lot of cutie pop, basically. He has worked really hard to bring cutie pop people and folk culture back into Manchester, or the North, because it's not just Manchester, it's Leeds and Liverpool and other places as well. So we're mainly what would be described as a fashion house, as opposed to a voguing house. Though we do have dancers, so that we're developing our skills in the different elements of Vogue and ballroom, because ballroom tends to be more about walking, and Vogue obviously is the dance. We have our own designers. Kenneth Morris, he designed this shirt, which also has a
shirt,
it's also got a fist in the back, but I'm not going to get up.
That's fine.
Off the side. But yeah, he's you can find him on Instagram, Ken Moss Creations. He's our in-house designer, and really amazing stuff, and actually also a kinkster, so he brings elements of fetish into the fashion, which is really I find really beautiful.
Well, you see a lot of fashion come from voguing culture. There's a lot of fashion that bleeds out from that all of a sudden over to the historically people stealing others' ideas, unfortunately, but it's what it happens.
Yes, but he's bringing sort of more kink aesthetic into the fashion that he's doing. So that I find really fascinating. So he's sort of brought, like one of the things he did early on was bring a kente design into harnesses. And we walked that for the UK Black Pride Vogue Ball that was up here a couple of years back. And that was really, really fabulous. So yeah, we're doing one in November in Birmingham. We're also doing again the Black Pride Vogue Ball in December, but I think they've already sold out. They do kind of just sell out really fast.
Have you seen like a spike in interest since Pose started?
Yeah, I think definitely that. There's a regular, very large ball that has happened for quite a few years. Darren Suarez, House of Suarez in Liverpool, he's been doing those for quite a while. So there's always been this kind of presence for quite a while before Pose.
Yeah.
But what Darren Pritchard's done is really bring QTPOC people back into that and bring the more authentic sort of Vogue back into the North, which is, we're still learning. So it's not like, not to say that we are, we're already at that level of other Vogue houses which exist, like La Beija and Ninja and all of those guys. We're not saying we're anywhere near those sort of things. We're just mainly all babies, but just learning about the culture and what it has to offer us in our communities, and basically celebrate ourselves more than anything else. It's been really quite like shocking and revealing to me how much just walking and embodying our, this kind of elevated version of ourselves, and sat in a room full of people who are celebrating us rather than criticizing it, or like scrutinizing us in ways, has been really incredibly empowering. I was quite blown away by how much that had an effect on me after years of going, oh no, not, sort of. And initially there was this kind of like, oh, I'll give it a go. It's interesting. I'll see what the experience is like. But after doing it for the first time, I was just sort of, wow, that really meant something, and I was quite surprised by that, as I'd already done what I'd seen as performances, like with the choir and in other things. I was kind of expecting it to be more of a performative thing, but it was very much embodying and owning the space and having people celebrate you in that space. And that's, it was special.
It's about like celebrating your authentic self, even if it's slightly elevated or more flamboyant or masculine or however you want to present, and it's a safe space to do that in.
Yes, absolutely. It's a beautiful, it's a really beautiful experience, and it's also like the people who see you are being celebrated because they're like you as well, and they haven't, it's like having people come up to you afterwards and go, that really meant something to me to see you up on the catwalk like that, because I never saw myself that way, but because you kind of look like me, I get that, like, and so I'm very much, it's for me, but it's also for the people who see me. So there's an added element of that sort of, it's giving back to the audience as much as the audience is giving to me. And that really is quite lovely.
It all comes down to representation. It's about being able to see yourself in something. And it's why I get annoyed when people lose their shit of, oh, Superman's son is now bisexual. It's like, oh, just all cry fucking over it. And I was just like,
is that a big deal?
It's not a big deal. And it's about that bisexual boy or bisexual girl sitting in their room reading the comic. It's like, oh my God, that's me. I may not have the superpowers, but this gives me the superpowers to be my authentic self. And that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. It is people, well, we are quite change averse as human beings. So I think people are, and it's also like it demonstrates just how much visibility matters, because you've changed one character who's not even real to bisexual, and suddenly your world is so rocked that you have to make a fuss about it and complain. So obviously it does matter in a very big way.
I can't remember what the company is, but there's a fabulous commercial on TV at the moment with a boy in makeup.
Oh, yes.
It's a house insurance.
Isn't it Mark Spencer's or something like that?
No, I think it's house insurance, but It's
All
just
right.
fabulous. It's absolutely, he's just living his best life and
Yeah.
dressing how he wants, putting makeup, destroying the house. But
Yeah.
not that kids should do that. They shouldn't destroy the house. But it's just such a fabulous, fabulous thing. But yet again,
Yeah.
people are losing their shit about it because it's like, boys don't do that. It's like, of course they do. I did when I was
Yeah.
a kid.
It's
And
what I find really sad about the sort of cis male experience, if you like, is this sort of, and obviously this is as somebody who's observing it rather than living it, but like as boys get older, they have the things that bring them real joy taken away from them almost. You know, these bright colors and things like playing and just being very kind of like this. I'm watching my nephews growing up at the moment, so they're like this sweetness and attract. Like one of my nephews loves fluorescent colors, and then he's having this experience as he gets older of being socially policed into wearing black. You know, and it's like, really, do you really have to take that away from him? Like, why can he not just have that joy of being with these incredibly bright colors, which I would not like wear myself, but you know, he wants that. So let him have it. And why does that have any connection to his identity as a cis male or a straight male or a gay male or whoever he is? Because it's just a color. You know, it doesn't mean anything, and you're putting that meaning onto him. And
you're shaming a child into conforming. That's
yeah,
the problem.
basically. And it's sad, really, because I think men have a very narrow set of parameters which allow them to be men. And the fear of being not men is so great that they literally give up so much in order to fit into that box, which is, you know, it's like, maybe you should just not worry about it so much.
Well, I'm lucky. I grew up with a mother who allowed me to be me, and
Yeah,
that meant I went into her wardrobe and put on one of her dresses or wore her high heels. That was not a problem. I did experience later in life when my interest of Barbies kind of switched over to the more masculine toys. It
yeah,
isn't in fucking masculine toys. It's all fucking. You can play with what you want, but it switched, and my dad like bought me everything because it's like,
yeah,
oh, maybe that'll
yeah.
change.
Quick, buy all the stuff.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't blame my dad for it, but it definitely it set things in motion in my brain about those type of things. And even in lockdown, I challenged myself a little bit at home, and I put nail polish on my nails because it's been
Yeah,
I've become a man thing to wear nail polish. And
yes.
you know what? And I hate saying it, it was a challenge, even for me being at
Oh,
home by myself. I don't know why, because it doesn't fucking matter. But
no.
it made me uncomfortable. And I was just like,
Yeah.
where's this coming from? That it doesn't
Well, it's,
matter.
you want to be accepted. That's the thing, and especially when we're that young, that acceptance is very important to us. And any kind of transgression
Yeah.
make us uncomfortable. But that's like, I kind of enjoy the transgression. You know, if it isn't
Well, I
making me,
wouldn't dress like this if I
yeah,
didn't. Of course, this is very masculine presenting. I know this,
yeah,
but I enjoy it because there's a little bit of a shock value, and
yeah,
it's not conforming. Also, I fucking love wearing stuff like this, but
yeah,
it is because as just a regular gay man, I can be slightly flamboyant and not as masculine as some gay men can be. So this is like hyper masculine, like presenting something,
yeah,
not necessarily a costume for me, but it is like elevating something I want, and
yeah,
that can be healthy. And definitely also on the lever scene, sometimes you do also see toxic masculinity, I would say.
yeah. I mean, it's very,
Finding the balance.
yeah, exactly. But also, I mean, the way I say to other people is like, if you identify as masculine, then you do flamboyance in a masculine way. It doesn't it doesn't masculinity to be flamboyant.
No.
Because because you identify as male, your flamboyance is masculine. Where the people try to shame you by saying, "Oh, you're being feminine or effeminate," or whatever they put that onto you. But actually, your flamboyance is a masculine trait. It's feminine if it comes from someone who identifies as female. And this whole idea that effeminate men, they're still men. They're still masculine.
Still men, yes. That doesn't change.
But that policing, and that's why I say, you as men, we have this, or sometimes we have this very, very narrow corridor of what is allowed, and that makes you a man. But what I say is, anything you do, regardless of whether it's within that corridor or not, is masculine because of how you identify. So you can dress up in a sparkly shirt or a sparkly dress with spaghetti straps and high heels. You are still, because you identify as male, are masculine. It's just that it's an expression that is shocking to society that has made masculinity this big. So I think, it offers both men and women, whether they're cis or trans, a greater amount of freedom to see this thing as a playground. It's like, how can I express my masculinity in a way that may be surprising or shocking to other people, but also know it's masculinity because I am masculine. I am a male person, and that's sort of the kind of joy that comes from allowing ourselves these spaces of transgressing things which are so unquestioned, that people don't even realize that they're just ideas.
Absolutely. And that's why language is so important as well.
Yeah.
We're coming to the end of our time, and I would love to talk even more, but we're limited to an hour. It's actually been an absolute joy to have you on. And
it's been a pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, it's been absolutely great. So, it's been amazing. Thank you, Oskar.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
And that was Oskar. Wasn't that amazing? I'm so happy to have him on, and it's been very educational for me. We covered so many different topics, and probably keep talking. As there was a delay from last week, next episode is next week, and the topic will be fisting next week. Well, it'll be one of the topics. So tune in and give a hand. So have a great weekend, and see you next week. Bye.